She counted the coins with trembling fingers, as if the copper and brass might rearrange themselves into something kinder. The bus lurched forward, hot and packed, a metal lung breathing in and out on a weekday afternoon. A small body curled against her side. Sofia's small arm looped around Leticia's waist, hair damp at the nape from the day's heat. The girl hummed a tune she had invented that morning, a string of nonsense syllables that sounded to Leticia like hope that hadn't yet learned the shape of disappointment. Leticia kept her eyes on the tiny heap of change in her palm. It felt heavier than it was. A quarter, 3 dimes, 5 pennies, the clink of things that had been earned in scattered hours, in supermarket lines, in coins gathered from under sofas to pay for diapers. She added, subtracted, rearranged, $2 short. She could feel the number like a pressure at the base of her skull, a steady throb that had been there ever since the landlord's notice slid under her door last month. "Fare, please," the conductor said, his voice thin through the roar. It was the same voice that had said, "Next stop," and "Leave the rear doors clear." Now it carried finality. He tapped the card machine with a practiced, impatient rhythm. Someone laughed once in that dry, private way people laugh when they are relieved it's not them. I don't have the full fare," Leticia whispered. The words were small and private in the middle of a crowd, even as everyone's eyes pressed at the edges of her like witness. "You can't ride without paying," the conductor said. He handed the card reader back and pointed toward the doors. It wasn't cruel. He didn't need to be cruel. The law of the route, the rule of the route, was a thing more stubborn than sympathy. Sofia looked up at the man with the conductor's cap and blinked. Her lip quivered. She had not yet learned the timing of adult embarrassment. For her, the world still made room for songs and stray pigeons and the promise of a sandwich after nap time. Leticia saw the worry settle into the little contour of her daughter's mouth, and something cold tightened in her chest. "We don't have anywhere to go," Leticia said, not to the conductor, but into the space between him and the doors. Her voice broke like a fragile glass. People shifted, eyes briefly meeting hers and sliding away, like they were avoiding stepping on the crack that might already be her life falling apart. A man behind them cleared his throat. "There's a bus stop down the road where you can transfer." "The transfer doesn't cover a shortage," the conductor said. "Please," Sofia said, her small voice loud in the sudden stillness. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Leticia's fingers closed over the coins until they hurt. She remembered the morning months ago when she had learned she was pregnant, how the world had brightened and then thinned at the edges, how every job interview after had gone from hopeful to apologetic once employers saw the bump she tried to hide in fitted blouses. She had lost one job because of the pregnancy, another when the company restructured and looked for reasons to let go. She had tried temp work, night shifts, a laundry gig, anything that would let her keep Sofia in daycare for a few hours. The savings had been a sliver for a year. Rent was an argument that visited their tiny apartment every month like a collector with bad manners. She had a neighbor, Donna Sida, a woman from down the hall with a stern way of patting Sofia's curls as if to arrange her life into better order. Donna Sida watched Sofia for the mornings when Leticia took a cleaning job at the school or the hotel. She charged what she could and took payment in eggs and the promise of mending hems. When Leticia had no coins at all, Donna Sida had let them stay with an evenness that was not charity, but neighborliness, and it had felt like a warm blanket in the cold. But today there was no Donna Sida at the corner, no familiar door to knock on. The landlord had been clear last week. Pay on Friday or the lease was under review. Leticia had been crossing words with herself about finding odd work, about postponing the check on the electricity bill. She had not imagined this, being asked to step down, to step out, to let the doors close on her child. "Please," she mouthed again, because she could not hand the conductor her shame like a ticket and expect to board. A hush spread. Phones came out of pockets like small private torches. Someone made a documentary look with their phone and then put it away. A woman leaned over and said to Leticia, "Sometimes," and the sentence broke off into the polite distance of advice offered to strangers. The bus smelled of breath and cheap cleaning fluid and hot metal. The heat wrapped around them like a second coat. The conductor's jaw tightened. "You can get off," he said. There was no malice in it. Duty was a type of armor. Leticia picked Sofia up. The child's legs were thin and tired. She hugged her close, feeling the small back press flat against her own, the weight of responsibility heavy as a stone she had to carry until the end of her days. They stepped down into the dusty air on the curb. The bus pulled away, and with it a smear of exhaust and the echo of departure. "What will we do?" Sofia asked, so small and already wise in ways children are when adults are tired. Leticia put on a smile that was practice and broke immediately. "We'll find a sandwich," she said, as if that could keep the apartment, the lights, the warm bed. She had no plan. She had an address, a rent-due notice, a stack of unpaid calls, and $2 the world said would let them stay. Without it, they were invisible to the system that had rules instead of mercy. A black car idled at the light across the street. Leticia hardly registered it at first. Her world had contracted to the cavity in her purse and the warm smell of oil fraying from the bus lane. But then the driver's window rolled down, and a man in the front seat leaned forward and looked at them with a careful, sharp attention that made her feel both seen and frightened. He had the posture of someone for whom control was a practice. The crease of his suit and the angle of his chin all said success. Leticia had been around men in suits before, clerks, shop owners, the scolding father at the block party who felt entitled to advise young mothers. She braced for pity, or the kind of benevolence that tasted like obligation. The man walked over, which struck her as audacious. People watched, murmured. The conductor did not move. He stopped a polite distance away and cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said. He spoke softly, like someone used to wallets and meetings and carefully managed lives. "I'm Raphael. I saw what happened." He looked at Sofia with an expression that softened, and the lines around his eyes suggested a memory. "Is she all right?" Sofia blinked at him, then pressed closer to Leticia. "I'm hungry," she said again. Raphael nodded, and for a moment Leticia only noticed how clean his hands were, how they did not tremble with the panic that had lived in hers for months. He extended a hand not to pass money, but to hand a small paper bag. Inside, the smell of a sandwich and fruit was a balm. The gesture was practical. It was not a solution, just a bridge across a moment. "Thank you," Leticia said. Her voice was suspicious of gifts. She looked at his eyes to find the bottom of his intent, and found a pause there that held not judgment, but recognition. Raphael didn't offer a sermon. He had his own memory flickering like a film behind his gaze. He had been a child once, smaller and not as clean, standing on a street and counting coins while the world decided how much a person was worth in that moment. His mother had been asked to step out of a line at a grocery store years ago, embarrassed in a way he had not understood until later, when he himself had learned what the edges of money could carve into a life. That memory, small, sharp, and unhealed, was why his throat tightened now. "I have a car," he said, as if that explained anything. "I can give you a ride, if you'd rather not wait here." Leticia's first instinct was to refuse. The word stranger hung like a protective net, but there was also the practical arithmetic of life. The bus might mean walking, which might mean missing the last of the daycare's hours and another unpaid fee, which might mean the landlord's patience running thinner. She looked at Sofia's face again, the same face that had fallen asleep on the floor beside many a rejected application packet. Leticia weighed danger against survival with the tightness of someone who had practiced hard choices for too long. "Where would you take us?" she asked. "My office is close," he said. "We can sit, have coffee. If you prefer, I can find somewhere for Sofia to wait and you can call someone. Or I can—" He stopped, aware of the presumption in offering a man's resources, like a bridge over a life he did not yet know. "Look, I don't have much right to intrude. I remember a day like this. I thought maybe you'd rather not be standing here." Leticia watched him. The city continued its indifferent hum. Bikes bell, horns in the distance, the smell of frying oil from a street vendor somewhere 2 blocks away. People glanced, then looked away. She thought of the rent notice, of the unpaid last month at the daycare, of Sofia's small toothbrush flopping in the cup. She thought of every job interview whose smile had dried into a checkable list of things she lacked. She accepted the sandwich first. She unwrapped it slowly, as if savoring was a contradiction of her situation. Sofia took a bite and sighed like a child who had rediscovered safety. Leticia ate too, 1 corner at a time, the bread dry and miraculous. Raphael watched them with a mixture of discretion and persistence. "If you'd be open to it," he said finally, "my company is looking for someone to help with administrative work. It's not charity. It's a paying role. My assistant Carla handles most onboarding. She's worked with here for years and will make sure whoever starts has the tools they need. I can't promise anything beyond the interview, but I can offer you the chance to come by tomorrow and meet them." The words landed like a stone and rippled. Leticia felt the weight of the offer, and a protective part of her flinched. Opportunities had a way of sounding like miracles and then revealing strings. "I don't want charity," she said. The sentence was sharp as glass, because she had been given too many things that required the surrender of pride. "If it's a job, it has to be a job. I can work. I will work." Raphael's face cleared. There was relief in that because he had feared the opposite, the look in someone's eyes that accepted charity with a small gratefulness that needed no dignity. "It's a job," he said. "There will be expectations. We're an honest shop. Pay is competitive. The schedule is flexible. We can arrange hours so you can arrange care for Sofia. Carla will walk you through it. And if you're worried about it being unequal, I'll make sure HR is in the loop. I want it to be fair." Leticia's skepticism softened, not because of the suit or the car, but because of the word fair. She had spent seasons of her life feeling at the mercy of systems that had rules, but no human articulation. Someone offering a role with clarity and steps felt like a thing she could enter without sacrificing herself. Why would you do that?" she asked, because the question could not be simplified into politeness. "Why help strangers?" Raphael's shoulders shifted. He had practiced theoretically generous answers in the mirror for board meetings, not for the flint of a woman who had just been asked to get off a bus. "Because I remember my mother," he said finally. "I remember being small and knowing in some kind of bone-deep way that there are moments when a person's dignity can feel like it's for sale. I remember how that felt. Now I have the ability to act when I see it. That's clumsy to say, I'm sure." He looked at Sofia with an intimacy that had nothing to do with his money. "And I have a soft spot for sandwiches." Leticia let herself laugh, a tiny, unexpected sound that felt like a crack in thick glass. The streetlight turned green. The city moved on. People around them repositioned themselves into traffic and errands. Raphael extended his hand in a practical, civilized way and offered his business card. It was heavy with the sort of paper people used when they intended to be taken seriously. It read his name, his company, an office number. She tucked the card into her wallet like a promise, and not a favor. "If I come," she said, "I'll be on time. I'll work." "That's all I ask," he said. Before they left, Leticia called Donna Sida. Her neighbor's voice on the line was a small, steady thing. "Of course," Donna Sida said without hesitation. "Bring them over. I'll warm something. Don't be proud, we help our own." Leticia wanted to hang up and cry into the phone with gratitude and the shame that lived alongside it. She held Sofia as they walked toward Raphael's car. People watched as they crossed the street, some with the wary curiosity of eyewitnesses, others with a small, private softening. Leticia felt their eyes like a weather system, clouds moving over a landscape that could not be changed. The back seat of the car was quiet leather, cool and foreign. It smelled faintly of citrus and polished wood. Sofia rested her head against Leticia's arm and fell asleep almost immediately, as if the sandwich and the movement across the city had exhausted the day's small worries. Leticia sat straight and wondered how to call the present. Desperate, hopeful, cautious. Raphael drove not too fast, not too slow. He didn't ask invasive questions. When the car eased into the rhythm of the road, he said, "If you want, I can drive you to Donacida, and then to the office. I don't expect anything today, but if you can come by tomorrow for an interview, we'll make it clear and professional. Carla'll meet you. We keep things by the book." Leticia traced the business card in her palm. It was a bridge she could walk across, a choice she could make without giving up the small firmness of her independence. She thought of Sofia, of the way the girl's small hands drew suns on paper with streaks of green and blue, of the laugh that bubbled when Leticia managed a particularly ridiculous face. She thought of the landlord's notice and the hush of the phone when lenders called. She thought of the nights she had said to the ceiling, "Tomorrow," and found tomorrow packed with obstacles. "Thank you," she said again, and the words were a negotiation as much as gratitude. "I'll come by." Raphael gave directions in a matter-of-fact way. 9:15, reception desk will let you in. Ask for Carla, wear what you're comfortable wearing. Bring a list of references if you have them. No pressure. We'll start with a trial task, see how it goes. Leticia said, "A trial task," then tried to imagine what she might be asked to do. Answer phones, file, type, navigate the polite frustrations of office life. She had an administrative background from before Sofia years ago, filing systems, inventory, a shorthand of professional competence that felt distant like a past habit. She started to make a list in her head of what she needed to comb through in her purse. Copies of a former job's pay stubs, the certificate she'd earned in a community college course, the name of the woman who had once supervised her at a temp agency. Raphael spoke softly, as if not to break the fragile newness of trust. "If you don't feel comfortable for any reason, tell me. You don't have to accept anything that makes you feel unsafe. I'm offering a professional door, that's all. If you open it on your terms." Leticia wanted to believe him, and also wanted to keep her guard up like armor you put on for long nights. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small envelope with the company logo on it. Inside were basic information forms, an address, and a note he had scribbled. "If you need help getting childcare arrangements sorted, tell Carla. We'll do what we can through our employee assistance. No strings attached." She looked at the note. It meant more than the sandwich, more than the ride. It meant an attempt by someone who had resources to make a scaffolding without making her feel like she was being rescued hollowly. It meant the chance to work and pay rent and not have the world reduce her to a moment on a bus. When they reached Donacida's building, Leticia woke Sofia gently. The neighbor opened her door, an apron still tied at her waist. She took Sofia into her arms, as if she were a promise. "Go," she told Leticia, "and don't think too much of yourself. Think of what you can do." Leticia walked to the car and then remembered the business card. She looked at Raphael and said, almost as a small private defiance, "I'll be there." He nodded. The car moved away, and Leticia watched the black vehicle retreat into the stream of traffic that hummed like an artery. She held the business card like a small talisman. On the way back to her building, she stopped and bought a new pair of shoelaces and a pack of colored pencils for Sofia, small things that cost so little but felt like reclamation. That night, after she had tucked Sofia under blankets that smelled faintly of soap and dried fruit, Leticia sat at the little kitchen table with the envelopes spread out like a map of her life. Bills, notices, a faded certificate of a past course. She made a list of references, scribbling past supervisors' names with phone numbers, filling in dates where memory let her. The next morning, she ironed a shirt that had seen better days, but no holes. She braided her hair with the care of someone who was trying to make a small peace between the public face and the private story. She left Sofia with Donatida and felt the first prickle in her throat, a kind of fear laced with the cautiousness of someone learning to hope. When she arrived at the address Raphael had given, the building rose in glass, polished and steady. It reminded her of something she had seen on television once, a set piece that belonged to people who did not worry about coins. The lobby was bright and smelled of citrus and paper. Two men in suits talked at the front desk with shoes that shined like promises. Carla met Leticia at the elevator door with a quick smile and a hand extended. "You must be Leticia," Carla said. Her voice was brisk but not unfriendly. She had the kind of energy that suggested someone who had been through the rounds and come out organized. "Raphael told me you might be in today." Leticia felt a surge of nerves, of an interview she had not been expecting, of being measured by someone who did not yet know she had been kicked off a bus for $2. "Yes," she said. "Leticia, thank you for seeing me." Carla led her through a corridor of glass offices. Plants crouched at strategic places. The hum of productivity felt like a predictable machine. Leticia's palms sweated. She adjusted the strap of her bag and smoothed the front of her shirt with 2 fingers. "First things first," Carla said. "We'll do a quick orientation, show you the basics, and then I'll set a small task. It's nothing that will trap you. Just answering phones, booking a few maintenance requests, simple filing. We like people who can think on their feet." There in the bright space, it happened, a colleague, Mauricio, waved at them from a desk with a mug that read "Keeper." His greeting was casual, human. The environment was not theatrical charity. It had its own rhythms and rules. A woman at a desk smiled and said, "Welcome, Leticia. If you need anything, I'm Carla." The recognition felt like rain after drought. Raphael appeared then, not in a showy entry, but passing through the open plan with a briefcase in hand. His presence did not overwhelm the room. Instead, it folded into it, measured and human. He touched her fingertips in a brief, professional way, an acknowledgement rather than a claim. "We'll make sure this is a fair process," he said again quietly. "If you start, we'll put a plan in place, an initial 2-week period to get used to the tasks, goals to track progress, and HR oversight. If any of it feels off, you tell Carla or HR. I want your performance to be about you and your abilities, not my intervening." Leticia felt a small relief. The offer of oversight mattered more than she had expected. Power could be a heavy thing, and the knowledge that the company would not be a private favor but a structured role gave her a confidence she could clip onto. Carla handed her a simple item, a name tag printed with Leticia's name and a temporary ID card. "We'll get you set up with an email," she said. "Mauricio will show you the filing system. And don't worry, if you need to step out for Sofia or to call, we're flexible. We're small, but we act like we care." Leticia laughed then, a real laugh, because care was a small, miraculous thing she had not known how to afford. She folded into the rhythms of the office like someone learning steps to a new dance. A computer hummed. A phone rang. She listened, absorbed. And when they handed her a first small task, typing a memo, sorting invoices, she approached it the way someone does when survival and pride are both stakes. She moved with the competence of a person who had once done similar work and had not yet rusted. Halfway through the morning, a colleague, Carla included, watched as Leticia navigated a scheduling quirk with a kind of calm that made the problem feel smaller. "Good job," a woman near the printer said. It was simple, but it landed like a signed certificate. Carla smiled and said, "We're glad you're here." Leticia felt a warmth that was not shame, not pity, just the glow of being acknowledged for skill rather than situation. She made a small, considered note on her pad. Breathe. Raphael checked in once more, offering a practical update on scheduling and reiterating the 2-week trial structure. He asked if she had any concerns. For a moment, the power the man occupied was a visible line in the room. She felt it, but he framed it as something to be minimized. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, tell Carla or HR. You won't be penalized for speaking up. Your consent and comfort matter. Leticia nodded. She had been on both sides of power, once as someone who had received orders and once as someone who had given them. The explicitness of his offer, rules, HR, oversight, softened what could otherwise have been an awkward imbalance. At lunch, she found herself sitting in a small break room, a sandwich in hand and a napkin with her name scrawled in a corporate pen. She ate slowly, thinking of Sofia in the afternoon, of Donna Shida's parallel life in the building down the hall, of the rent notice that had not yet been averted. The job was a hinge. It could tilt her life a degree towards stability, or it could, she feared, break under expectation. The phone on her desk buzzed with a text from Raphael. It was brief. "How is it going? Take your time. Leticia, you're doing fine." There was no overreach in the message, no attempt to micromanage. It was the kind of small recognition that felt respectful. She put the phone aside and went back to filing, to sorting, to doing the work. When she went to leave that afternoon, Mauricio walked her to the elevator and offered a practical piece of advice. "If you need tips on juggling tasks, come to me. I used to be a single dad for a minute. Coffee sometimes helps." He handed her a mug with a joke about paperclips. It was an odd, grounding moment that refused the narrative of rescue and replaced it with simple workplace camaraderie. That night at home, Leticia tucked Sofia into bed and lay awake after the lamp went out. She thought about the day like one catalogued small savories: the sandwich, the card, the ride, the office, the name tag. She had not yet told Donna Shida everything. She had not called her mother, who lived 2 states away and whose voice carried a different kind of distance. She counted not coins this time, but small victories: a compliment from a co-worker, a clear offer with a start date. She allowed herself to imagine, a cautious thing, what it would feel like to bring home a steady check again. But as she allowed herself the image, a thread of fear unfurled. What if this was temporary? A kindness that would end with the season? What if her mistakes, the gaps in employment, would mark her permanently? She pressed her hand to the wall, a steady anchor. She had done this before. She had pieced life back together after other losses. She would do it again. She had no other viable plan. The following morning, she dressed with the small ceremony of someone trying to honor a chance. Sofia drew a sun on a scrap of cardboard and handed it to Leticia with solemn pride. "For your desk," the child said. On the bus that morning, Leticia held her coins differently. They were still there, fragile, but their shape had changed. She clutched the business card in the pocket of her blouse like a talisman. When the city unrolled itself to her window, she did not think of humiliation anymore as an inevitable place to live. She thought of it as a moment that had pushed her into a strange intersection where someone with a car had chosen to act. As the bus slowed for her stop, she felt the usual nervousness that comes before a new beginning. She stepped off, past the paper cups and the puddles, and toward the building with the glass facade, toward a place that would measure her by different things. She breathed in the human calculus of all that could happen: the tests, the small triumphs, the days when courage was simply showing up. She was not certain any longer that being $2 short would always define them. She had a business card, she had a job offer, she had a neighbor who could fold Sofia into the day. She had the quiet conviction that she would work, not to be fixed, but to claim space. The city hummed with a softness that suggested possibility more than guarantee. When she stepped through the revolving doors, the world did not applaud. People inside the lobby glanced at her like anyone else, with the discreet curiosity reserved for newcomers. But somewhere in the arrangement of that day, a sandwich, a ride, a card, something had shifted. It would not erase the months she had weathered or the landlord's notice, but it could begin to stitch new patterns into the fabric of their lives. Leticia set her bag on her shoulder and moved forward, the name tag light against her chest like a small badge of intent. The elevator rose, and on the glass the city reflected back at her, houses and traffic, a child on a bicycle, the dull shine of office towers. She thought of Sofia, sleeping now under Donna Cedar's roof, of the packets of unpaid notices that sat like quiet alarms on her table, and she felt for the first time in a long while that the future might be negotiated. She did not know how every strand would fall. She could not promise that a job would solve everything. She only knew that she had a place to go now where her work might be seen and counted. That was not nothing. At her desk, she sat down and opened the email Carla had set up for her. The message was simple. Welcome aboard. 2-week trial. We'll be meeting tomorrow at 9:30 to go over specifics. Bring questions. Bring your resilience. Leticia smiled at the word resilience. It felt like a truth about the person she had been raising in day rooms and near-emptied bank accounts, that people can bend and still stand. She looked at the business card in her hand again. Raphael's name printed steady at the top. She had accepted a ride, a sandwich, an interview. She had walked into a lobby that did not belong to pity and had sat at a desk and done the work. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, the office hummed a rhythm she was beginning to learn. She typed a sentence, hit send, and felt the small click of something setting into motion. She would go home to Sofia that night. She would plan, make lists, call references, iron collars. The road ahead had unknowns, but it had now a direction. When the day ended, Raphael walked through the office door. He paused at the threshold and looked at her, a private, appraising look that carried no entitlement, only an acknowledgement. "How was your first day?" he asked. "Long," she said, and the single word was honest and luminous. "Good long or bad long?" he asked, as if such things mattered because they were the scaffolding of an honest life. She thought of the woman who had said "good job" by the printer. She thought of the name tag that clung to her chest like a small medal of arrival. "Good long," she said. Raphael nodded like a man relieved. He asked if she had questions. She asked a practical one about the 2-week review process. He explained clearly how they evaluated new hires, who would be present, and how HR would document everything. He mentioned that if, after 2 weeks, she felt the environment wasn't right, the company would support a transition plan to a different position within the firm or offer resources to find another place. The words were measured. They left no room for coercion. Leticia absorbed it. She felt lighter and, at the same time, aware that a new kind of responsibility had crept in. The responsibility to pay a rent check she had already missed, to be the reliable ear for a small child, to hold the fragile hope without letting it fracture under fear. When she walked out of the office that evening, the sun was low and soft, the city painted in a forgiving light. She held the business card again, and this time it felt less like a single lifeline and more like a rope with others tied to it. Her neighbor's key, Carla's smile, Mauricio's quick joke, the steady refusal inside her to be defined by what she lacked. Sofia ran out of Donna Cedar's door with crayons in hand, and the child's arms opened so wide they nearly contained the whole day. Leticia scooped her up. The little girl smelled of soap and cabbage and kindness. "Did you work hard today?" Sofia asked, solemn as any judge. "Yes," Leticia said, "very hard." They walked home together, the coins in Leticia's purse jostling like a small metronome. She had been kicked off a bus for being $2 short and had stepped into a life that, for the moment, offered the possibility of change. It would be messy, it would be human, and it would not fix everything, but it was a beginning that Leticia had chosen to accept, with eyes open and dignity intact. Somewhere between the evening light and the sound of Sofia narrating a story about a cat that could fly, Leticia allowed herself to rest. Tomorrow, she'd return. She would learn the filing system, memorize names, and hold fast to the promise that competence that she carried like a quiet, stubborn proof. She did not assume the world would be gentle with that proof, but she would show it anyway. If this story is moving you, tap like so others can find it too. Weeks folded into each other like pages turned quickly in a book. The 2-week trial became a month, the trial tasks stacked into a rhythm Leticia could keep. Mornings were a choreography. Wake Sofia, walk her to Donnacida's apartment, kiss the child's crown, and then head for the glass doors that no longer felt as foreign. Her hands learned the office's tempo. How to prioritize a phone call with a calm voice, how to sort invoices by date without losing sight of tiny discrepancies, how to file with a neatness that reduced small crises into solvable lists. Each completed task fed a small, steady increase in confidence. Carla watched her work with the careful attention of someone who had seen many new people arrive, and either bloom or flounder. One afternoon, as Leticia routed a string of vendor emails into tidy folders and corrected a billing error no one else had seen, Carla said plainly, "You're precise. You catch the details other people miss. That matters here." It was not a dramatic proclamation. It landed like a ledger, balanced, practical and valuable. Leticia felt heat rise to her face, not the fever of embarrassment, but the honest glow of being recognized. Mauricio, more casual with his praise, dropped a paperclip heroically into her hand like an inside joke. "Keep the mug. You earned it," he said, grinning. "And if you ever need tips on how not to let the printer defeat you, I'm your guy." His humor made the office feel human-sized, a place where competence could be met with ordinary kindness instead of pity. Payday came with a small, private thrill. Leticia watched the direct deposit land in her account and felt a knot in her chest loosen by degrees. She paid one of the overdue bills that night. It did not erase the months of worry, but it softened the edges. She folded the receipt into her ledger and tucked it into her wallet like an oath kept. Raphael's gestures stayed measured. He did not hover, he did not micromanage. He left notes in the margins of spreadsheets sometimes, a brief "well done" next to a cleared docket, or a neutral text that asked after Sofia. Small, bounded courtesies, always respectful of the line between professional and personal. He arranged for the company's employee assistance program to help with emergency childcare vouchers when daycare hiccups happened, and he explained the policy to her not as a favor, but as part of a benefit available to any employee who needed it. It was structure, not charity. Outside of the office, Leticia knitted a new network. Donnacida's reliability was a constant. The neighbor refused payment some mornings and accepted a jar of preserves on others. Leticia's mother called on Sundays. She listened with a distance and tenderness that showed a woman who'd quietly learned to keep her own heart in reserve. Leticia began to return some of the favors she could, mending a tear in Donnacida's apron, sweeping the hallway when she had quiet time. Small reciprocities that kept dignity in place. At home, evenings shifted. There were homework drawings. Sofia's sons grew more complex, their rays longer, sometimes with an extra smile added as if to guarantee joy. They ate dinners with less anxiety about empty cupboards. Leticia set aside small sums in a savings jar, so modest it could have been laughed at, until it wasn't. The jar grew. The rent notices lost some of their urgency. Months later, the office convened a performance review. It was not a secretive thing. HR had an agenda, goals were spelled out in black and white, and Carla sat with Leticia and Mauricio as a witness. It was in that meeting, in the ordinary light of conference room fluorescence, that the company's judgment of her work landed in a way she had not allowed herself to expect. Your attention to detail improved our invoicing turnaround by a measurable amount, HR said. Clients noticed the prompt responses. This is not about gratitude. This is about measurable performance. Carla tapped a page and added simply, "You've added stability to our operations." The words were practical and exacting, an appraisal of skill rather than a sermon of pity. Leticia's throat tightened. She looked at Carla and saw nothing but professional respect. It mattered. Outside the strict boundaries of calendars and files, small wonderments threaded themselves into her life. Raphael invited Sofia and Leticia to a casual Saturday at a public park. No formality, just a picnic blanket and a paper plate of sandwiches. Raphael arrived with extra napkins and a gentle way of making a little person feel like the only person in the park. He pushed Sofia gently on a swing until her hair caught the sunlight like a halo. He listened when she invented stories and did not rush the childhood inventions into tidy summaries. In the cadence of that afternoon, Leticia watched a man who had seen indignity before move with care instead of pride. It didn't erase the imbalance, it made the other person human. Their interactions accumulated. A cup of coffee left on Leticia's desk with a small anonymous note that read, "Keep going." A text from Raphael the morning after she had stayed late. "Saw you left at 8. Hope you're okay. Call if you need anything." The texts were brief and respectful, not a constant chorus, but a quiet presence. The more time that passed, the more Leticia noticed where gratitude ended, and a different feeling began to make itself known. Something like ease in his company. A softness that had little to do with money and everything to do with listening. She kept herself cautious. She had watched the world lean on women in vulnerable positions and knew the thin line between help and dependence. The history of countless stories where favors stacked into obligations lived in her. She cultivated that caution like a tool. If anything in Raphael's manner suggested overreach, she would name it and draw a line. That also meant she gave herself permission, practical permission, to notice warmth and to accept it when offered without strings. She practiced distinguishing between an offer that reduced her and an offer that respected her agency. There was a night, some months after she had started, when the line began to shift. They had been working late, the office quiet, except for the hum of the HVAC and the occasional clicking of a keyboard. The city beyond the windows had that rare, clear hush that comes after rain. Raphael lingered by the open-plan desk cluster, holding 2 cups of tea. "You okay?" he asked, the question not managerial but plain curiosity. Leticia surprised herself by answering honestly. "I'm tired," she said. "Some days are just long, and I see how much there is to do." He nodded, as if he understood more than her exhaustion. "You've done exceptionally well," he said, eyes steady. "You've taken difficult tasks and made them look straightforward. You didn't ask for the easy way. That matters." The comment might have been praise in another life. In this moment, it felt like recognition of the person behind the work. A woman who had kept her head down and done the job. She felt the slow pressure of something that could become more than polite gratitude. "Thank you," she said. "It's good to hear that. It's good." He set his cup down with careful hands. "Leticia, I want to be blunt. He paused, searching for the language that would not sound like commerce or concession. "I feel protective of you," he admitted. "In the naive sense of the word and in the practical sense. I remember being small and feeling that the world decided what you were worth in a moment. I don't want to be the person who adds to that, but I also don't want to be someone who sits on the sidelines." She listened, measuring words. "I appreciate that," she said, which was the most honest thing she could offer at that moment. "But I need to be careful because you're my boss." The sentence was a boundary, not a rejection of personhood. She wanted it to be heard as such. His answer was immediate and responsible. "Then we'll make a plan, whatever direction this takes. If it takes any, HR will be informed. We'll restructure reporting so you do not report directly to me. I can step back from day-to-day supervision if that's necessary. I'll accept any measures they recommend. I want to be sure this is fair to you." It was the language of accountability. He did not ask her to trust his heart without safeguards. He asked instead to put the relationship into transparent structures to reduce risk. Leticia felt the weight of the offer. It was the kind of practical moral work she had quietly wanted someone to do. Name the power, then dismantle its ability to coerce. They agreed to give themselves time. They would not rush into anything. If feelings grew, they would take the formal steps first, notify HR, shift reporting lines, and perhaps even allow Leticia to consider a lateral move inside the company so daily supervision would come from someone else. Prevail made specific proposals. He would write a memo to HR acknowledging the power difference, request a neutral committee to oversee any personnel decisions that might affect her, and he would recuse himself from immediate evaluation tasks. Leticia asked for a written plan and a timeline. He provided it. The clarity felt like a seatbelt. In the weeks that followed, the protective infrastructure took shape. Raphael's announced recusal meant he was less present in the small evaluative ways at Leticia's desk. Carla took a more central role in her weekly check-ins. HR documented the steps taken and filed them in both of their employee records. The arrangement was not theatre, it was procedural, sober and slow, and completely designed to reduce the possibility of coercion. In that safer atmosphere, a different intimacy could evolve. It was not explosive or scripted, it was a series of ordinary moments that, when collected, felt significant. Raphael brought Sofia a small book after reading that the girl loved animals, an illustrated collection of stray dogs and cats that made Sofia squeal with delight. He stayed after a company picnic to let Sofia run in the sprinkler and helped her change into dry clothes with a gentlemanly awkwardness that Leticia found endearing. When he visited their small apartment to drop off a stack of age-appropriate puzzles, he admired the child's drawings without turning them into charity. He laughed at Sofia's jokes and took pleasure in small domestic rituals, setting plates, folding napkins, listening with a stillness that allowed a child's invented world to exist without being corrected. Leticia felt herself moving through a landscape of ordinary affection. She assessed each step. Did it feel reciprocal? Was it respectful of her choices? Each answer leaned toward consent. She did not feel pressured to rush. She felt permitted to slow down. When Raphael finally spoke the words more fully, it was in a setting carefully chosen for privacy and ordinariness. A small bistro with a table by the window where they had once shared coffee and watched rain gather on the glass. He spoke of his childhood, of humiliations he'd witnessed, and then of a softer thing, how watching Leticia's steadiness had shifted something in him that had nothing to do with status or pity. "I like you," he said simply. "I don't mean to make this messy or complicated. I'm saying it because I want to be honest." Leticia listened. She had learned to weigh honesty against consequence. "I like you too," she replied, after she had folded the idea carefully in her hands. "But I need clarity." She named again what she needed: a timeline for the changes in formal reporting, a commitment they would speak with HR before any further personal steps, and a promise that if either of them felt unsure, they would pause. Raphael agreed. They wrote a short statement together and sent it to HR to document their intention to respect company policy and to protect both their positions. The company's response was procedural and formal, as corporate policies tend to be. HR suggested a monthly review for the first 6 months to monitor whether the relationship created any real or perceived conflicts, and they recommended an internal mediator to be available if any employee raised concerns. The measures felt sensible. Leticia appreciated that the company took steps that treated the matter with respect and seriousness, rather than whispering judgments in corridors. The romance that followed did not erupt. It unfolded. Dates were simple and considerate. A Saturday at the community library's story hour, a Sunday visit to a neighborhood market where Sofia picked out a small toy, an evening where they cooked pasta together and Leticia laughed at Raphael's imperfect sauce. He asked to meet the people in her life who mattered, Donna Sida, a neighbor who accepted him with a practical curiosity, her mother, who took his hand for a moment and offered a blessing that contained a careful hope. Raphael did not parade his money. He used what he had to make small things gentler, a reliable babysitter he arranged without fanfare, a membership at a local museum so Sofia could see new worlds free of charge, not publicity for his kindness, but practical scaffolding. Leticia never relinquished her agency. When she felt uncomfortable with an invitation, she said no. When she felt safe, she said yes. When Raphael offered a more formal gesture, an offer to help with moving in extra furniture if she chose to, she negotiated the terms. No pressure, she insisted. If I want it, I will ask. He agreed. He continued to ensure that every aid he offered was either available to other employees in similar circumstances or routed through the company's employee assistance program. The safeguards made the relationship unusual in their thoroughness, and paradoxically, more relaxed. The months moved their small good things into everyday life. One autumn evening, after a day that had felt like 100 tiny victories and a handful of setbacks, Raphael asked to speak privately. He was quieter than usual. They sat on a bench in a park where Sofia chased a pigeon and let their conversation drift from work to smaller intimacies. He reached for her hand and did not rush. I was thinking, he said slowly, about partnership, not just the romantic sort, but the living together, waking up to each other sort. He looked at her as if the idea were a delicate thing he wanted to protect. I would like to share a space with you, if you want that too. Not because my resources fix everything, but because I want to build something with you. Leticia felt a complicated swell of emotions. Fear layered with an unexpected hope. The offer carried weight. It would change how they negotiated daily life, finances, and the care of Sofia. She asked questions, practical and necessary ones. Would that mean I stop working here, she asked. Would you want me to? Raphael had considered these questions. He had already spoken to HR about contingency plans, in part because he wanted the possibility of their domestic life to be free from the implicit strings of workplace dependency. No, he said. I think you should keep working if you want to. You've built something here. I don't want to take that away. I'm ready to change the structure of the company so there's no direct oversight, and to make sure any decisions about your role are made by a committee. If you'd prefer to move to a different position entirely to make things clean, I'll support that. The last thing I want is for you to feel beholden. Leticia considered the options. A life together would not be an erasure of the years she had carried alone. It would be a merging of two tracks that had formerly run separate. It would mean more shared responsibilities and new negotiations. She thought of Sofia's laugh, of the way her daughter had taken to Raphael without artifice, of the steady professionalism of her colleagues and the practical safeguards they had established. She imagined mornings in a kitchen with an extra pair of hands. She also imagined the vulnerability of losing the autonomy she'd fought for. What about you? She asked. What do you give up if we share a home? He smiled, and in that smile was humility. I give up a lot of neatness, he said jokingly. Then he grew serious. I give up the idea that everything I own can be kept outside of emotional risk. I'm aware I have resources. That's not something I can pretend away. But I want to use them to build a life with someone, not to hide behind them. She asked for time. That was reasonable. He agreed. They took the slow route, weeks of conversations about finances, fairness, privacy, roles, and expectations. They spoke to a financial counselor together to figure out how to manage household expenditures without erasing Leticia's autonomy. They negotiated household chores and parenting roles. They agreed on a trial period of cohabitation, a few months where they would see how living together felt in practice, with the option to separate if it did not suit either of them. The agreement was pragmatic and adult. Promises turned into actionable steps. The move-in day was modest. They laughed at the small absurdities, where to put a coffee grinder, which paintings to keep on which wall. Sofia helped with unpacking by announcing, with the fierce logic of children, which corner belonged to her. Leticia carried a box that contained mementos from a life that had been both frugal and rich in memory. A photograph of a younger version of herself with a colleague from a temp job, a small ceramic frog that had survived a move, and the now thick ledgers where she had once tracked bills with trembling hands. Raphael placed a houseplant near the window. He treated the things she brought with the same care he had shown when he first noticed the sandwich on a curb. Living together did not dissolve practical concerns. There were arguments in the small hours about who would wake with Sofia when she had a bad dream, about whose turn it was to empty the dishwasher. There were moments when the reality of combining two routines felt clumsy and raw. But there were also mornings when they both sat with coffee and watched Sofia build a fortress of blocks and felt a steady contentment that had once seemed unattainable. Professionally, Leticia continued to grow. She took a company-offered workshop on office management that built on her experience and earned a certificate she could point to with legitimate pride. When a restructuring opened a position in a different department that would remove any lingering perception of reporting bias, she applied and was selected by a committee. The transition was transparent and official. Her move into the new role was announced with an emphasis on her measured performance and the objective criteria that had guided the process. Carla nodded at her in the corridor and said, "You did it your way. Proud of you." Leticia felt the truth of that praise like a steadying hand. Over time, their life achieved a new normal. They kept their promises to themselves and to each other. Raphael continued to recuse himself from evaluative tasks related to Leticia. HR's monthly check-ins, which had once felt intrusive, became routine, nothing more than a measure that ensured fairness. Leticia's sense of dignity returned fully. Not because riches had made it so, but because every step toward a stable life had been hers to take and defended by clear boundaries. There was a quiet evening some months into their cohabitation when Raphael sat with Sofia on the living room floor and Leticia watched them. Sofia was threading beads into a necklace with a fierce concentration that made her tongue peek between her lips. Raphael handled the little beads with exaggerated care, and the child giggled. Leticia realized, with a kind of soft astonishment, how full her chest felt at that ordinary scene. It was not about erasing the past indignities. It was about creating a life where those indignities no longer had the power to define them. They eventually married in a small ceremony, no grand courthouse spectacle, no celebrity guests, just family, a handful of colleagues who had become friends, and Donatilla standing at Leticia's side like a pillar. The vows they spoke were plain: respect, partnership, honesty, and a promise to protect the dignity of one another. Raphael's speech that night was not about how much money he had or how heroic his act of kindness had been. It was simply about dignity and about the ripple effect of an act that had started on a bus. He said, "One small moment changed the course of our lives. But that moment was not enough on its own. It needed work, care, and the refusal to see one person as less." The guests applauded quietly. The sound felt like permission. Life did not end the way a storybook might promise. There were still bills, longer to-do lists, nights when Sofia woke with a fever and Leticia paced the floor with worry. But there were also paychecks that arrived on time, mentors who had become friends, and an apartment where the evening light hit the sink a certain way that made it glow. Leticia's ledgers were no longer documents of survival, but notebooks that showed budgets balanced and small savings accruing. She attended a night course now and then to polish skills she had once shelved, a personal insistence that she would always keep adding to her toolbox. Years later, when someone asked her what had changed her life, she would tell the truth plainly. Being kicked off that bus was a humiliation she never wanted repeated for anyone. The sandwich and the ride mattered in that moment because they prevented the worst immediate harm. But the thing that actually shifted everything was not a single gesture. It was the sequence of choices, her decision to accept a job and work at it, Carla and Maurizio's steady affirmation, Donacida's neighborly constancy, Raphael's willingness to be accountable for his resources and his feelings, and the company's insistence on transparency. It was dignity accepted and defended. On an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, Leticia took Sofia to the same bus stop where, years earlier, she had been asked to step off. The stop had been modernized. New shelter, a bench with a sticker about courtesy. Leticia held Sofia's hand and watched buses flow by like the city breathing. A mother in worn shoes stood there with a child picking at a cookie wrapper. The memory of the past folded over her like a cloak. She could feel in a quiet corner of her chest the old fear. But now she also felt the sturdier sensation of having been carried through. A new family joined the bench, young, tired, carrying the same human weight of too few coins. Leticia's eyes met the younger woman's for the briefest second. She remembered the precise contour of that morning, the conductor's shrug, the heat of the bus, Sofia's small voice. She reached into her bag and handed the woman $2, not a spectacle but a practical bridge. She did not do it to be seen. She did it because the memory of being small and counted by coins had been seared into her bones. The woman accepted it with trembling gratitude. Leticia smiled, not from superiority, but from recognition. She left without fanfare. Sofia trotted beside her, humming the same silly songs she had as a child. The city hummed with its ordinary promises. Leticia knew the work of a life was not offered in a single generous gesture or a romantic narrative of rescue. It was constructed in daily acts, those of work, of boundaries, of care. She had been offered an opportunity on a day she was $2 short, and she had taken it. She had kept the dignity that had almost been stripped away on a bus, and she had built a life that honored that dignity. Share this story if it moved you, and subscribe for more real-life stories where kindness, work, and respect create new beginnings.